Hello, my name is Cecilia Deterville, and along with Doctors Shawani Howard-Baptiste and Valeria Freisinger, I will be discussing Exploring Global Health Disparities, Afro-Caribbeans' Perception of the Prevalence of Type 2 Diabetes in Their Communities. Non-communicable diseases, as defined by the World Health Organization, are cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and diabetes. They are chronic and non-infectious and estimated to cause over 35 billion deaths annually. It is a global public health threat. Type 2 diabetes in developing nations of the Caribbean have one of the highest burdens of diabetes globally. One of the leading causes of death, along with chronic respiratory diseases, cancers, and cardiovascular diseases. Many public health officials predict approximately 75% of all cases of type 2 diabetes worldwide will be in developing countries like the Caribbean by the year 2025. Type 2 diabetes in developing nations of the Caribbean historically did not experience the impact of non-communicable diseases until the most recent decades. Diabetes is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and blindness. Our research aims to go beyond these lifestyle risk factors to assess broadly and deeply those social determinants of health that are specific to Afro-Caribbean families that affect their current state of health and the increased incidence and prevalence rate of non-communicable diseases, specifically type 2 diabetes. The impact of social determinants of health on Caribbean life. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, if not addressed, social determinants of health such as poverty, unsafe neighborhoods, poor housing, inadequate education, and poverty can negatively impact the health of individuals and communities in the United States and abroad. Samuels and Fraser contend that public health educators must look beyond individual lifestyle and instead focus on social determinants of health, which include urbanization, globalization, education, and aging. They also contend that these social determinants of health provide the context for unhealthy eating, physical inactivity, tobacco use, and alcohol abuse. Factors leading to the increased rates of diabetes in the Caribbean include poverty, increase of large industries, poor diets, decreases in economic development, urbanization and globalization, and lastly, healthcare system and immigration. Factors leading to the increased rates of diabetes in the Caribbean. The first, increase of large industries and poor diets. A diet high in fat, sugar, and processed foods increases one's chances of developing a number of health complications, including type 2 diabetes. Giant supermarkets are replacing traditional food outlets known for their rich variety of local fruits and vegetables to more processed food items that are high in sugar, salt, and fat, leaving local populations with poor food choices and diets. The second, healthcare system and emigration. The emigration of nurses, physicians, and health researchers from the Caribbean to the U.S. and elsewhere has led to a reduction in skilled healthcare labor from those regions. Hence, these countries are experiencing severe limitations in their commitment and capacity to provide equitable, quality healthcare services to their citizens. The third, decreases in economic development. Researchers argue that the power, prestige, and resources of more developed countries, for example, those of the US and the EU, agricultural subsidies make it very difficult for producers of fresh foods in developing countries to compete. This results in a reduction in the national average income of developing countries. The fourth, role of urbanization and globalization. Researchers also argue that the urbanization and globalization has contributed to an increase in unhealthy behaviors by worsening dietary patterns and lowering physical activity levels. People rely more on convenience foods and often walk less. Poverty. This includes a low economic status of Caribbean people, the inability to afford medications, and so on. Our study data and methods. This is a qualitative research that is interested in capturing the presence of type 2 diabetes in the Caribbean among people of African descent. Our research examines specifically the increased prevalence of type 2 diabetes among English-speaking peoples of Afro-Caribbean descent living on the Caribbean islands of Dominica, St. Lucia, Jamaica, and Barbados. The goal is to develop to an understanding as to why these disparities exist from the perspective of members of those communities. 6 participants were interviewed in 2012. 2 were male and 4 were female. All participants were of African descent and were born and raised in the Caribbean islands of St. Lucia, Dominica, Barbados, and Jamaica. The results. In a response to the question, how do Afro-Caribbeans make sense of the increasing prevalence of type 2 diabetes, 6 themes were generated from the interview data. These themes include restrictive options and choices, health, preventative measures, globalization and urbanization, consequences, and genetics. Several subthemes also comprise each of these larger themes. I just want to go over just a few of those themes, well actually 2 of them. Globalization and urbanization. One of our respondents, Mac, who is from Jamaica, states, Kingston is so urbanized because people don't have anywhere to plant their foods. Everything that you want, you have to go to the grocery store to get it. Whereas in the countryside, people have all those things on their property. The theme of health was described very well by Stephanie of Jamaica and Nola of Barbados. Stephanie states, type 2 diabetes is very high in Jamaica. I mean, it is very, very high in Jamaica, with a lot of people. It is the lack of primary health care or adequate health care, especially in rural areas. A lot of people might have it and don't even know that they have it. And it's been one of the #1 killers back at home. Nola states, I mean, Barbados has an extremely high prevalence of diabetes, and it's one of the major health issues. These are just a few examples of the interviews from this research. Results, limitations, and conclusion. These themes capture study participants' feelings about the disease, beliefs about how the disease had come to be so entrenched in their communities, and perceptions of measures that have been put in place to control the rise of type 2 diabetes. All of the participants agreed that the lack of physical activity and unhealthy diets contributed to the rise in type 2 diabetes. While most of the participants alluded to importation of foreign foods in their countries as being detrimental to health, some of the participants explained that traditional foods were also the culprit. In their different ways, participants indicated that globalization and urbanization have played a central role to the increase in type 2 diabetes in the Caribbean. A weakness of this study is the generalizability of the study. Due to the small sample size of participants, the findings from the interviews cannot be representative of all diabetic Afro-Caribbean people in Dominica, St. Lucia, Jamaica, and Barbados. While each participant's understanding on type 2 diabetes were unique, there were many shared beliefs and understanding. My references are attached. Thank you so much.